Well, we've believed all along that if the argument you're making with the Americans is tariffs are bad for your citizens, bad for your consumers, bad for your economy, it doesn't make sense to put them on yourselves. And that's exactly what we were doing. And full shout out to people like Premier Smith and Mo and others who long have been saying this is not the best way to go. We found ourselves isolated with China being the only other country who has the capacity to play that game. We don't.
Well, folks, it is never a dull moment here in Canada when it comes to the mainstream media, and today we got to do quite a bit of fact checking. So, without further ado, let's dive into the news. So, yesterday there was an array of different people on the mainstream media, from Tom Mulcair to Tim Hodgson, Doug Ford, and even Melanie Joly, and none other than Pierre Poilievre. And something that Pierre said during his press conference triggered Melanie Joly to the point where she started lying live on air. And this is what he had said in regards to Carney and the Liberal government.
Well, I'm glad that Mr. Carney has noticed my proposal from 3 years ago to develop the port of Churchill, which I proposed back in the spring of 2022. But what I find incredible is that he has been in power for 170 days, and not only is there not a single shovel in the ground on any of these projects, there's not even firm proposals for these projects. Let me put this into context. He was in Germany. The Germans built, from concept to completion, an entire LNG import terminal in 194 days. That's about how long Mark Carney has been Prime Minister. And he still doesn't even know what projects he wants to build, or how he's going to build them, or which companies are going to do the building. So what I think you're going to see from Mr. Carney is more big promises without any action. It's more liberal show business rather than getting it done. And I would say, don't confuse activity with achievement. Mr. Carney has been frantically jetting around the world doing photo ops and signing phony declarations that are unenforceable and have no money attached to them. But in 170 days, he doesn't have a single project underway, while $60 billion of investment, Canadian money, has fled our country, mostly to the United States, impoverishing our people and enriching foreign workers.
Now, Pierre had a lot to say in that statement, but the main thing that I kind of wanted to focus on was his claim about Mark Carney jet setting to EU, not actually getting any deals done, no money being put behind anything. And this is the question that the CBC host posed to Melanie Joly, which triggered her. Now, before we get to her answer, which was not even a real good answer, we can prove what Pierre is saying is correct by our own government's website. These are joint statements of enhancing the Canada-Poland strategic partnership. There's no actual documentation, agreement, nothing written or signed. This is just a joint statement that was released. Furthermore, a joint declaration of intent between Canada and Germany on critical minerals was announced the other day. But if we even scroll down here on the government's implementation and funding, this joint declaration of intent is not legally binding and does not create any financial commitment. And this is on the Government of Canada's website. So when the CBC goes and asks Melanie Joly this question, listen to her response, which again has nothing to do with the actual question.
You've been in Europe, the Prime Minister has been in Europe, and we heard from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who has been, maybe not a huge surprise, but a bit critical of what's been signed over the last few days with the Prime Minister in particular. And he says that the one deal with Germany on critical minerals is a phony declaration that is unenforceable with no money attached, and he's coming home with nothing of consequence. What's your defense of the government's agenda over there in Europe? What do you say to Mr. Poilievre?
I think Mr. Poilievre needs to look at himself in the mirror. When he's describing what you just said, I think he's talking about his own policy.
Why do you say that?
Because ultimately, he, as the opposition leader, has been talking a lot, but with no action. Never did we hear him that we should get to 3.5% of defense budget. Never did we hear him talking about the fact that our armed forces should get a pay raise in order to recruit better and to make sure that we could support our strong men and women. Never did we hear that we should increase defense procurement to make sure that we build more in Canada. Never did we hear from him neither the fact that ultimately we need to be less reliant on the US to become closer to Europe, and that's exactly what we are doing. And never did we hear him about also everything that is linked to our airspace sector and F-35s. So I could go on and on and on, but I think we have not a lot of time for this interview.
So she starts off by saying, as the leader of the opposition, he's been talking a lot, but no action. I'm not quite sure what she's expecting him to do since he's the leader of the opposition. He's not the actual official government like they are, who has had the ability to do many things, change up a lot of what they have implemented, and have yet to do that. And Pierre and the Conservatives have proposed, get rid of this, get rid of that, change this up, change that up, and the Liberals haven't done any of that. But furthermore, she talks about how he hasn't said anything about the troops and defense, which is also false. Back in February, he was in Iqaluit talking about the Arctic sovereignty, the Arctic policies, during the leadership campaigns or the Prime Minister's campaign. On the debate stage, he was asked about Ukraine, and he pivoted the question to talk about our own defense.
Our party supported donating missiles that the Canadian military was decommissioning. We supported funds and other armaments to back the Ukrainians in the defense of their sovereignty. We also need to rebuild our own Canadian military because the Russians want to make incursions into our waters. We'll be buying 4 massive Arctic icebreakers. I'll be opening the first Arctic base since the Cold War in Canada, CFB Iqaluit. We're going to double the size of the Arctic Rangers and fill the vacancies in our Canadian armed forces. We need a change to rebuild our military, which has been so disintegrated under the cuts and the mismanagement of the last 10 years. But we can have a change because we have the best soldiers, sailors, and airmen in the world, and they will have full backing from my government if you give me the honor of becoming Prime Minister.
Not only that, after he lost his riding in the election, he was in the Parliament 2 months ago making this statement: we need a plan to rebuild Canada's military. And in this video, this is what he says.
Let's focus on what we get done with the money we spend. It shouldn't simply be a question of the dollar figure. You know, if the government has another 10 big boondoggles like they did on the F-35 by canceling and then rebuying it, they would be able to get up to 3 or 4% without increasing any of our capabilities. I want us to focus on our capabilities. Yes, we'll hit the 2%, and then we can discuss how much higher to go after that. But the focus of NATO and our country has to be what extra defense capabilities are we able to add, and how can we be the strongest possible military with the most affordable price tag to the taxpayer at the same time. After another lost decade of Liberal cuts, mismanagement, and wasted money on bungled projects, our military has never been weaker. Now more than ever, we need a strong military that will reassert our sovereignty in the north, take back control of our Arctic waters. We need at least 1, but probably 2 Arctic bases. We need fighter jets, Poseidon aircraft. We need 4 and not 2 icebreakers to bust up the ice and reassert that we are properly the ones that lay claim over our Arctic waters. We also need to fill the massive number of vacancies that have built up in our military after the last decade by increasing the dollars available to recruit and focusing the military on a warrior culture that actually inspires people to want to join again. All of this is going to take money, and that's why we support getting back to the 2% target as soon as possible. And we will support additional money for our military. That's why we're calling on the government to bring in a budget, because all of this will require a budget that not only puts this money forward, clearly identifies where it comes from, but cuts waste in bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid, corporate welfare, and other areas so that the necessary increase in the military does not come as an inflationary burden on the backs of our Canadian taxpayers who've been suffering for far too long.
Now, after hearing that, I would hope you could see that she actually has no idea what she's talking about. But if you are a CBC watcher or maybe even a Liberal supporter, you listen to Melanie Joly and you probably just agree with anything she says. However, the fact checking did not stop there, because later on in this press conference, Pierre was questioned about pipelines and ports, which he's been very vocal about. And this is because CTV's Vashi Kapelos yesterday did an interview with the CEO of TMX, the pipeline. And he simply talked about optimizing it, not actually implementing another pipeline, which Pierre addresses and says, well, of course he's going to say that. He has a vested interest in being basically the only pipeline that provides to the country.
Good morning, Maria Saru, CTV News.
Good morning.
You're really stressing the importance of pipelines in our sovereignty. So
Yes.
why or why not would you be supportive of optimizing TMX so its capacity exceeds 1 million barrels a day before another pipeline is built?
So I agree with the first clause in your sentence. Should we optimize TMX? Absolutely. Let's increase the volumes that go through the Trans Mountain Pipeline up to 1 million. Let's do it yesterday. But that still won't be enough. We have the capacity to pipe 2 or 3 million additional barrels of oil to overseas markets. So let's do all of it. And, you know, I find it a little bit strange that TMX, which is still controlled by the government, is trying to shut out competition. And I don't know, I hope this is not a signal that Mark Carney is sending to the pipeline company the federal government controls, that they want to block competitors from also having pipelines. Remember, the TMX CEO has an interest in this, because if there are no other pipelines built, he can charge higher fees on the oil that goes through his pipe. So let's not pretend that he is just an objective commentator on this. We need more pipes. We need a pipe that goes from Hardisty to the Pacific, either in Kitimat or in Prince Rupert. We need a pipe that should go all the way to St. John, New Brunswick. We should have a pipe that goes to Churchill. We should have all of the above, because we have more than enough oil to reach all of the markets of the world. While the Americans have doubled their oil production in the last 10 years, ours has been flat, as Liberals wage a full war on oil and gas.
Now, in Vashi's interview with the CEO, he said that he doesn't think that we need to expand the pipeline in terms of adding new pipelines. He just thinks that we need to increase the horsepower of the pipeline so that it can pump more barrels of oil, and that should be sufficient for now.
Yeah. Everyone's wondering, in the conventional energy space, does that mean another pipeline, which is something some provinces want and others, like the one we're in, have expressed some reservations about? Yeah. Does it mean more LNG? Does it, all of those questions are circulating. In your view, what you're talking about, is that something that would fit into that category?
I think you would look at, my personal belief, okay, is that you look at the optimization of your existing pipelines. It's the first thing you do, because it's the easiest thing to do. It's much harder to build another one of the, another TMX somewhere. And for that reason, optimize the kit that you have, which you can do in steps over time, and then add capacity as it's needed. And then you have time to evaluate the bigger issue, which is, do you need another pipeline somewhere?
Now, I don't know about you, but I much rather Pierre's idea with the extra pipelines, going to different ports, expanding it across our country, rather than this optimization of the current system we have just to draw in a few more extra 1,000 barrels. And then you're going to get to that same situation where you hit a cap, you can't pull out anymore, but you don't have the capacity to transfer it to another pipeline or utilize another pipeline, because there is none. Now, interestingly enough, Tim Hodgson's was asked about this from CTV, saying, what do you think about them going forward with just optimizing the pipeline that we currently have? And he said that wouldn't be something of a national interest project.
Hi there, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. I'm the CTV News. Yesterday, we spoke with the CEO of Trans Mountain, and he voiced support for wanting to optimize the pipeline they have now. Are you supportive of optimizing TMX so its capacity can exceed 1 million barrels a day?
It's not. The optimization is something that I don't think that's a project of national interest. So I'm not going to jump in front of that. If there's a case to be made for optimization, they will make that case, and we'll consider it through the normal course.
Now, unlike Joly, I will say Tim seems to have a little bit more of a head on his shoulders. He kind of understands what he's talking about. But then he goes and he starts talking about Germany and the LNG commitment that we just gave, and him saying, well, we should be listening to our customers, and they say that they want our LNG. As I showed in yesterday's video, they've been saying this since 2022 when Justin Trudeau made the announcement that there was no business case. The Chancellor then said, yeah, we are interested in the LNG. But to Tim Hodgson here, again, he's using this language where, well, they claim they want it, they seem like they're interested, yada, yada, yada. So now they're going to do it, even though they made that very clear 3 years ago.
What you do to decide whether there's need of a project is talk to your customers. What we heard loud and clear from German LNG buyers and LNG users is they believe there is demand and they want to buy our products. What we heard very clearly from a number of German LNG buyers and users and from the German government is, while they believe natural gas is a transition fuel, what they have come to realize over the last several years, given the geopolitical uncertainty, given the rapidly increasing demand for electricity, partially driven by the AI revolution, is that they will need more of that transition fuel than they thought a few years ago. They will need materially more than they thought a few years ago, and they will need it for longer than they believed a few years ago. That was a message we heard consistently from German buyers of LNG and users of LNG and from the German government. We had 4 different Canadian LNG projects that are at various stages of commercial operation over here. All of them were receiving the same message from Germans. So in my experience, the best way to tell whether there's demand for something is to talk to the customers. The customers are saying there's demand.
Now, I actually don't disagree with Tim Hodgson. They're listening to the customer. Great idea. Outside of the fact that I proved to you that they said this to you 3 years ago and the Liberal government has done nothing to advance us closer. I understand he wasn't part of the government then, but now they're going to implement this, which will take a minimum of 5 years before anything gets moving. And we're going to stay in this limbo that we are currently in because we can't actually get anything over there in the meantime. So we need a change of government big time so that things can start moving, or they need to implement the Sovereignty Act that the Conservatives are proposing. Now, the last thing I wanted to end on was we keep hearing about how stupid the Americans are, how dumb they are, how much smarter we are. We heard that all during the election cycle, or even the Liberal leadership race, where Karina Gould kept pushing that out, saying we are much smarter than the Americans. Well, Tom Mulcair actually yesterday proved that the Americans outsmarted us by not taxing us or tariffing us at all on the CUSMA products, whereas that's what we did and fell into the trap where now the Americans could use that against us, and we essentially had to just give up all of our cards to get out of that situation.
Yeah, Tom, it's interesting, on that, sort of removing of those sort of counter tariffs there, a lot of people have said, Mark Carney talked a lot about elbows up in the campaign, but it seems he's more taking an elbows down approach. And you've already alluded to the sort of, erratic behavior coming out of the White House here. So what do you make of that approach? Is that the right approach, sort of take tariffs away or counter tariffs away, kind of put the elbows down and try to, talk through this?
That's exactly where we are right now. And I think that the Americans were quite clever on this, because in all the bluster and the baloney that came out of Trump, he was going to tariff absolutely everything under the sun. But when the dust started to settle, Nick, we realized that the Americans had cleverly avoided almost completely touching anything that should come in under the Canada-US-Mexico trade deal. And why is that important? Well, we were putting the Americans on the right side of the negotiation. We were putting them on the right side of the law, and we'd gone in the opposite direction.
Proving yet again our crisis negotiator is terrible at his job. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section below. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. I love reading all the comments that I can. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.